Hi, everyone. It's Margaret Manning here with LifeAfterDeath.com. LifeAfterDeath.com is a community of people who are fascinated by the topic of life after death, near-death experience, reincarnation, and the afterlife. And we have conversations here with an open mind and open heart and invite guests to come along and share their own experiences. And my guest today is Dr. Eben Alexander. Now, Dr. Alexander is a man of science. He is a doctor, and he's a neuroscientist, and neurosurgeon. And he has worked with people for 25 plus years on different brain issues, brain diseases. And so he was very surprised when in 2008, his world was turned upside down by his own experience. He went into a coma unexpectedly. It was a very rare situation, and he was so close to death. And basically a miracle happened, and he turned around and recovered. But when he awoke, he remembered what had happened. So, Dr. Alexander, I'm so intrigued to have you here today and to introduce you to our community. And I would love you to tell us what happened, because people are thinking, yes, what happened? What did you experience in that time?
Margaret, thanks for having me. It's great to be on with you today.
Very welcome.
Yeah, I had spent the first 54 years of my life honing a scientific worldview about the nature of reality, about the relationship between brain and mind, the nature of consciousness. And I fully bought into the conventional kind of neuroscientific party line that the physical world is all that exists, and therefore the brain must somehow create consciousness out of physical matter. And admittedly, nobody seemed to know how that worked, but I just felt like if we kept working on it, sooner or later we could answer all these questions from a physicalist or materialist viewpoint. And that's why my journey was so extraordinary. And it really was a perfect gift for a neurosurgeon who's interested in understanding consciousness, because it was basically a perfect experimental preparation that should have disabled all but the most rudimentary forms of consciousness. And yet what I found is that my brain was being overtaken by this extremely aggressive and primitive and should have killed me bacterial infection. Right. I actually experienced the most robust set of circumstances in my life. It was just astonishing. It started what I call the earthworm eye view, a very primitive, coarse, unresponsive realm. Important to point out that one of the atypical features of my near-death experience is the fact that I was amnesic, that I really did not remember any of the details of Eben Alexander's life. I didn't remember any of the main
highlights,
people who were surrounding me at the bedside while I was deep in coma, family members. When I came back to this world on day 7 of coma, I had no idea who they were. So this amnesia is a very important feature, and it took me months to begin to glimpse why the amnesia was necessary for my particular journey. But that journey and the memories that were in my mind when I woke up on day 7 of coma that Sunday morning in November of 2008, the memories started in what I call the earthworm eye view, a primitive, coarse, unresponsive realm that seemed to go for a very long time, but I was rescued from that by this slowly spinning white light that came packaged with a perfect musical melody. And that ushered me up as a portal into this rich, ultra-real gateway valley that was brisk and alive and robust, just filled with experience and kind of meaning and my understanding of it all. This earthworm eye view setting had succumbed to this brilliant ultra-real valley, the Gateway Valley, that had a lot of Earth-like features, but also had many deep spiritual constituents, like all of the joy and merriment that I witnessed in the beings dancing in this meadow down below us. Cool, because up above were these swooping orbs of light that were emanating chants and anthems and hymns. And what I called them when I came back to this world were angelic choirs. Wow. And yet so much of the lessons in that journey went far beyond anything that I would consider my religious teachings from having grown up in a Methodist church. I think that's one misunderstanding about near-death experiences. People don't realize how often they shift your religious beliefs because they refine and show you more powerfully of that spiritual realm. And that's what I experienced in that Gateway Valley.
That is amazing description. I mean, I can feel the energy that comes out of you when you start to describe this. But I have a question. As you were talking, you were using words like, I saw this and I heard this sound, or I saw this orb. Now, how are those senses, how were they different than the senses that you would feel in your body?
Well, for one thing, we experience things in those realms through identification. We become broad swathes of the universe that's being demonstrated to us as part of the lesson. So that's one of the astonishing things. So you're not, we're used to, in these bodies, getting sensory information from the world around us, what we see and hear and touch and smell, all that, and thinking that it's all being filtered by these first by our sensory systems, and then also the brain seems to eliminate a tremendous amount of the information and just kind of select down to this narrow little bandwidth of a reality that it presents to us. And this is really a very odd circumstance. And basically what my journey showed me very clearly, and that Gateway Valley was just a stepping stone on the way to higher and higher levels, all the way out to pure oneness and identification with that God force at the core of all creation in the universe throughout all of eternity and infinity. The problem is, in those realms, we don't have those filtering mechanisms of sensory apparatus and the brain kind of reducing all this down. So we're drinking from the hose of primordial consciousness full bore, like drinking from a fire hose. It's one of the reasons why it's so impossible to put these experiences into words. Meaning, because our words are good for describing a trip to Disney World, but they're not very well suited to these extraordinary journeys where we can actually see kind of chains of events over long segments of time, all in one kind of now occurrence, and we can witness ourselves and kind of the drama that we experience in this myth of individuality, but realize it's really the dream of the one mind that we are all sharing. So sorry, sorry to interrupt you. No, sorry, we've got a delay here. I apologize. One thing I was going to say is I interviewed Dr. Raymond Moody, and he described the consciousness that other people have experienced in a very similar way, that it was basically in a dimension that language could not reach. But when you came back, you did start to talk to people, and you did start to find that there were commonalities. Are there any, we know the classic ones, like you mentioned, the white light and so on. Were there people that you saw there? Did you talk to other people? What other similarities did you have? Yes, I would say that the similarities are legion. And in fact, for those who are interested in my medical records, important to point out that a case review was just done of those medical records. It took more than 2 years for 3 independent physicians who were not involved in my care. That case report came out in the Journal of Nervous and Mental Diseases in September of 2018.
Wow. And
anyone on earth can access it through my website. If you go to ebenalexander.com and look at the blog posting I did back in September on the new report online validating the facts of my medical aspects of my journey, there that report is. You can click on it and learn a lot more about it. In fact, what those investigators do is basically support the picture that I present in Proof of Heaven, where my brain was basically all 8 lobes of my brain overrun with this extremely overwhelming bacterial infection that should have killed me. And these doctors who reviewed the case talk about how amazing it is I had any experience at all given the damage to my brain. But even more surprising is the fact that I went on to a full recovery.
Well, that was what I was going to ask you. I mean, what do you think happened in that, when you were in that heightened state of consciousness that gave the chemical reaction or whatever it took to heal a brain that was clearly damaged?
Well, I'm not sure I can explain that, but in our newest book, Living in a Mindful Universe, we go into great detail about the current scientific revolution about the mental features of this universe, which is a reality that quantum physicists have been coming to recognize over many decades. Neuroscientists, philosophers of mind are coming to recognize. In medicine, we've acknowledged mind over matter for decades through our acknowledgement of placebo effect. And that's something we discuss in detail in our 3rd book too, because placebo effect is getting stronger. And placebo effect is one of the most beautiful examples of how we live in a mental universe And our mind actually has tremendous power over that. To kind of short circuit an answer to your question, I've come to realize as a physician that all healing, all physical, mental, emotional health in any sense must depend fundamentally on spiritual health. And when I use the word spiritual, what I'm talking about there is a sense of connection with the workings of this universe and that mental layer, that kind of God force layer, and also the sense of meaning and purpose in our lives. To me, the word spirituality contains those two major ingredients. And the scientific world is coming to acknowledge all that in a very profound fashion in this modern awakening around the neuroscience of consciousness itself. Not the creator.
Okay, so I have a practical question. So if you are someone who is listening to you right now and thinking, this is fascinating, this doctor is clearly, speaking from his heart, from his experience, it's the truth. And I would like to be able to raise my consciousness without having to go through that near-death experience. I mean, is that something that's possible? I mean, is consciousness something that...
In fact, that is the focus of our book, Living in a Mindful Universe, is that any sentient being, that is, anyone who is conscious, can actually explore consciousness and come to realize all these deep truths for themselves. That's why centering prayer and very deep forms of meditation and along those lines, I would certainly talk about sacred acoustics. And this is something that we talk about in great detail in Living in a Mindful Universe, because the co-founder of Sacred Acoustics, Karen Newell, is my life partner and also the co-author of that book.
That is fascinating stuff. I was looking at some of her work, and that is truly, when you're talking about sound and matter, that starts going back to the very basics of Hinduism and other religions who figured this out 4,000 years ago, and now science is maybe catching up, like you said.
Finally catching up. But again, cutting to the chase for your audience, important to point out these sounds from Sacred Acoustics have such power, we believe, because they actually are primarily processed in the lower brainstem in a circuit that arose more than 300 million years ago. And that's one of the reasons they have such an extraordinary effect on engendering transcendental levels of conscious awareness, because most of the sounds that humans have used for centuries or millennia to get into transcendental states of conscious awareness involve processing in the acoustic cortex. If you're talking about chants, anthems, what have you, most of that processing is in a very recently evolved part of the brain. And that's why I think Sacred Acoustics is so powerful, because it's actually going at a much more ancient circuit in the lower brainstem. And that's what enables such extraordinary events to occur in people seeking deep states of transcendental conscious awareness through Sacred Acoustics.
So this is a fairly obvious question, but how did this change your life, this experience that you now in your heart know there is something beyond death that is more vibrant, more amazing than life itself? Why did you stay, I guess? Why did you stay?
I think near-death experiences change the equation dramatically. They really show how we're all in this together. We are all truly sharing the dream of the one mind. Once you realize the modern scientific support for non-local consciousness, things like telepathy, precognition, presentiment, psychokinesis, the influencing matter from afar using the mind alone. The reality of these has been supported by scientific studies, and it really just shows we need a much bigger theater to explain anything about the nature of consciousness, because consciousness is bigger than anything we've ever tried to explain before. It's really our interface with all of reality.
Well, I would recommend anyone who's fascinated by this conversation, and I'm actually going to read your book because I'm very intrigued. You have your website is ebenalexander.com. And you've got 3 books. You've got The Proof of Heaven, which is the book you wrote right after the experience. You have The Map of Heaven, which is a deeper look at consciousness.
The Map of Heaven is really just saying, look, these experiences are universal. People have them out there by the millions, thousands of years. They are not hallucinations or dreams or drug effects. There's something much deeper when you look at all the similarities in them. And Map of Heaven just shows the commonality. Living in a Mindful Universe, the 3rd book, actually goes much, much further in tying together the science and the spirituality, which is the big, tough issue that has faced our world for thousands of years, and we're trying to make sense of it. This also involves resolving some of the deepest mysteries in quantum physics, which is the most fundamental statement of the mind-body question. And that's why it's important to include that discussion and understanding.
Okay, I am full of information in my head, and I'm so excited to have spoken with you and to have seen your perspective on this, and people that are watching who have a fear of death, because I think a lot of people might be here in this community because they are not sure what's going to happen. You've given them a perspective from for a credible doctor who didn't have that belief before you experienced it yourself, and that's powerful.
Well, there are a lot of other doctors and scientists involved in this awakening. I mean, literally hundreds of scientists, physicists, engineers, psychologists, psychiatrists, what have you, around the world who realize this extraordinary worldview shift that is coming to humanity, which will be a tremendous gift for this world. It'll bring much more peace, harmony, understanding, compassion, and kindness to human behavior.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for this sharing of your knowledge and your experience. And we're going to have another conversation and take this a little bit deeper. But for now, I think we've given people a lot to look at and think about. Go out to the website, ebenalexander.com. We'll put that up on the video there so people will see it. And thank you again so much from the bottom of my heart for your conversation. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to our Life After Death YouTube channel and visit our website at lifeafterdeath.com. We are a community of people who are fascinated by the topic of life after death and subjects like near-death experience, the afterlife, reincarnation, and spirituality. Together, we are exploring and discovering these topics together with curiosity and an open heart.